members are advised that you've got a timer in front of you. And if that timer is working correctly, when it gets into the yellow, that means you've got a minute left. In the case of Steny Hoyer, we're going to start in the yellow. I'm only kidding, Steny. He is my friend.
Everybody else was hoping you were accurate.
Yeah. We'll start our Q&A now with our witnesses, and I'll lead. First of all, stabilizing the national debt should be a top priority, not just this administration, but I think there is a clarion call around the country for us to do something about this unsustainable trajectory that we're on. It is my belief that the president's 24 budget falls short of the deficit reduction needed to put our country on a sustainable path. Director Young, when you testified here last year on the 23 budget, we discussed the debt and the need for solutions to address runaway spending and the national ledger. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is a pretty simple question. Do you believe that government spending contributes to inflation?
I have the Secretary of Treasury here who probably can speak to inflation better than I can, but I'll point out, and it was mentioned by Mr. Hoyer, we see inflation in most democracy or most economies across the world. So what that tells us is that coming out of the pandemic, supply chain shortages have much more to do with inflationary pressures we see across the globe.
Secretary Yellen?
So I would agree with that. We have now had 7 months in which 12-month inflation has been declining. We're seeing reduced pressures on supply chains, a dramatic decline in shipping costs, for example, that was an indicator of supply chain problems. The shifts in work, means of work during the pandemic gave rise to big increases in housing prices and rental prices. And we can see in current indicators that's now stabilizing or coming down, and that will eventually pass through into lower inflation. So it is the first job, the job of the Federal Reserve to take actions to bring inflation down. But these factors are lowering it, and the administration has taken actions to bring down healthcare costs, to bring down energy prices, and to lower the costs that burden American families.
So it is my opinion that federal spending, excessive federal spending, I know we got to spend money to finance the role of government, but excessive federal spending, in my opinion, does contribute to inflation. So the next question is, how much inflation should we endure, and at what point will it be necessary for us to roll back federal spending, irrespective of the fact that has been suggested by the ranker and by the two witnesses here today that the entire world is suffering from inflationary spirals, so it's natural that I don't necessarily subscribe to that notion that we have to be like the rest of the world. We have some unique opportunities to control it ourselves, to include the federal budgets. So at what point in time, Ms. Young, does it become necessary for us to reduce federal spending?
So I'll certainly answer that. You asked a couple different ways. Should we keep our pressure on to bring down inflation? My answer to that is absolutely. We share that goal. We should understand what causes it. As the Secretary's pointed out, the Fed has tools in which to deal with inflation with regard to raising rates. This administration's also taken action through the Inflation Reduction Act. But you're right, we share your concerns that Americans are paying too much for household goods. But I'd also point out some of the investments you see here, like in childcare and housing and college, is exactly to help American families have a little more breathing room when they're trying to do their budgets. So we agree, and I understand there'll be disagreements on how to deal with that and bring that in. But my concern, if we go under the acts in some of these programs, I think about low-income heating assistance. What happens to those families if those federal programs are pulled back so far that they hurt the very people I think all of us want to help?
Thank you. I'm out of time. I'll recognize now the ranking member, Mr. Hoyer.
I'll try to stay in my time.